Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here is your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning and welcome back to Faith in Our Hometown, our weekly discussion on issues of faith that impact us as people of the greater Joplin area. Our guest this morning is going to be James Whitford, who is the Executive Director of the Watered Gardens Gospel Rescue Mission. And James is here this morning to talk a little bit with us about how we as people of faith kind of try to figure out how do we work and should we work hand in hand with the government? How do we do all that stuff and make the best recommendations that we can for trying to help some of the people who need some assistance here in our area? And what's the best way to help? And James has got always an insightful thinker about some of those things, and sometimes challenging to some of us, but it's still good for us to hear. So we're going to be talking a little bit about all that this morning. So we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Don't go away. Join us for this Sunday morning.
From childhood, whenever I was about 12, I would say, my weight really started climbing and it never really plateaued. I've tried low-carb diets, high-protein diets. I've tried calorie diets. It's very important to Dr. Lou that this is a team effort, so a primary care doctor following up with me regularly, and the dietitian was very helpful on providing recipes and helpful information to help me be successful in my journey. I am very active and I play sports with the kids. We like to go play volleyball. I've done some warrior dashes.
So thanks for joining us again for another Sunday morning for our conversation here in Faith in Our Hometown. As I said before the break, our guest this morning is James Whitford, who is the Executive Director of the Watered Garden Gospel Rescue Mission. James, welcome back.
Thanks,
It's always entertaining for me to talk with you, and sometimes challenging because, we don't always land in the same spot, but actually that makes better for TV than when we're always agreeing on everything.
Well, sure. Yeah, it's a little more exciting that way, isn't it?
Exactly. So, we really, there are so many, we live in a time when everybody is disagreeing about the right way to go about things. And really, at our core, we both want the same thing. We want people to prosper. We want, people to do well by themselves and by God. We want all that stuff.
People to be healthy.
Exactly.
And well fed.
Exactly.
Sure.
So how do we accomplish some of those things? And, we could sometimes come down to different places on, should the government be taking care of that? Should the churches be taking care of that? Where should we go with some of that?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things we've got to really look at is the safety net of food stamps, and is it really a safety net, or is it a trap of sorts? And so I think that's one of the big topics right now. That there's a lot of talk about that. And in fact, there's a study that came out in 2011 that just looked at 56%, found that 56% of people who were on food stamps had been on food stamps for more than 5 years. So it almost seems like a trap. And
could be.
And I think initially just myself getting involved in the mission work and wanting to help people and having a compassion for people who were struggling with addiction and poverty and homelessness. You want to help any way that you can. But what I found is that the government's help is sometimes interfering with what would be a healthier way to help people in need. And so I'll tell you what happened one time is, I began to connect our community together, our not-for-profits, with an online tool so that we could share information just to know better what's going on with people as they go from place to place to place. We want to help people and make sure we don't trap them in dependency in a community of benevolence. That's why we did that.
Right, and I think it was a great great learning experience for all the folks in our area who try to help.
Yeah.
And I think it was also, and I'll say this just bluntly, there are some people who are trying to game the system. You
Well,
know, there were some people who were
sometimes,
trying to
sure.
take advantage, and you know, and
Sure.
again, we're all trying to be good stewards of the monies that we're given to take care of the people who really need it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, without the tool, we couldn't have pushed back a little bit and said, "All right, now what? But what are you doing for yourself? And how can we help you a little bit better rather than just simply giving you stuff?" You know,
Exactly. We
yeah.
just want to help people in the right way. And how can
Exactly.
we connect our community to do that?
Exactly.
The problem was when I called, we realized that people come in to a church or a mission or a charity and they ask for food, because that's what we're talking about today, food stamps.
Sure.
And one of the questions that might be asked at the desk, and it's a good question, is, are you on food stamps? Now, the person that's there in need can say no, but there's really no way to verify that. So I called our food stamp office locally and I said, listen, we've connected scores of organizations in our community who are helping the same people that you're helping, and we want to connect with you to share some information. But they couldn't. And see, this is where one of the problems of government kind of comes into play, because the food stamp program is a program of the USDA. And
Right.
the USDA has a right to privacy policy in place so that they can't share any information with a network of missions like mine who are wanting to work together to really help people in need. Because there's a breach in that ability to communicate, there's naturally abuse that happens.
Sure.
Yeah.
And again, you know, it's I guess one of my coworkers and I talk about this a lot. You know, as we start talking about this, it's like, you know, it's our job to do charity. It's the church's job to do charity. It's in some ways the government's job to try to do justice. Okay, you know, you really shouldn't necessarily go to the government for charity. You should come to the churches for charity. But in terms of what we try to do and what the government tries to do is the government tries to say, well, okay, if we've got people out there who can't make the ends meet, how can we then help our farmers by making sure that there's, you know, a market for their goods, you know, and so that's how some of this stuff comes about, USDA stuff, okay? So how do we help the farmers, you know, to provide, you know, staples for, you know, some of our folks who might have trouble meeting ends, and then how do we do that? And how do we create a program then where they can get, you know, some of those things? So it's, again, more just, you know, we've got the food produced, we'll make sure that our folks can eat, and, you know, the government's done, you know, what seems like at the outset a very good thing.
Right.
And then it's the problem set in, you know.
Well, sure, and I think there's probably a lot to debate in whether that is the right way to go about that.
Sure.
So, if you know, one of the things that I think we should talk about today, and I don't know if it happens in this segment or the next, is this Catholic social teaching principle of subsidiarity.
Right.
So that keeps coming back to mind when we talk about this issue, because just like you said,
You brought it up. You go ahead and explain it to everybody.
well, okay,
Right.
so
Because
sure.
right now our listeners are going,
subsidiarity.
"So what is he talking about, subsidiarity?"
It was introduced by Pope Pius in 1932 in an encyclical he wrote, Quadragesimo Anno, and he talks about subsidiarity, introduces the principle and says that it's a grave evil, a disturbance of right order for a larger, more bureaucratic system to do for an individual what a lesser subordinate organization can do.
Right, which is one of the reasons why their Gospel Rescue Mission exists, why St. Peter's does their outreach house, those
The
kinds of things.
church.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea of charity too. I mean, you know, it's just
Right.
like you don't want, you know, why would the government get involved in doing charity? You know, the government should be more worried about justice rather than charity.
Yeah.
We should be doing the charity stuff.
Well, absolutely. And so what happens is the government gets involved. There's research that shows a true crowd out effect. So now you have people in the church that might typically feel compassion to be involved, but the compassion is being relieved, you might say, because someone else
Somebody else did that for us. So
So,
the government's taking care of that, so we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
Right. And
yeah,
it does.
yeah.
And it does happen. Those things do happen. I think that there is, I think there is a little bit of compassion fatigue out there sometimes. And somebody says, well, if somebody else is taking care of that, then I don't have to worry about that one. Because one of the things I can tell you just real honestly about the Joplin area, and every group that I've talked to, whether it be, you know, folks in Carthage who are doing the same work that we're trying to do here in Joplin, folks in the Osho running their food banks down there, everybody just knows that one of the things that we do not want to happen in our area is for anybody to be hungry. We all know that. We don't want anybody to go to bed hungry. We don't want our kids going to bed hungry. And we know that there are folks out there that are struggling sometimes to put food on their tables. We know that, okay? And whether or not we agree with all the, that's where we're going to disagree on. So how are we going to do all that?
It is the how-to.
How-to is always the tricky part.
It's the how-to.
But what I will tell you is that people in this community are compassionate and they don't want anybody to be hungry. Now, how do we address the issue and how do we get there in a way that's good?
Right.
And again, we've talked to all these organizations. We can talk, and we're going to probably come down and we're going to agree on a lot of things. We're going to probably come down a little bit at different spots, and that's okay. But I can tell you that I know that the compassion's out there, and I know for the most part, we don't want to necessarily toss it up. And I will say, in terms of the nutrition assistance programs, I think there are problems with them. But again, I worry about some of the people that might fall through the cracks if we weren't doing them. Now, again, I don't know how to tweak that yet. Right. But I'm certainly open to the conversation about how to tweak it, because I don't think that exactly how it's working is great.
Well, I think it's a safety net that's become a first net instead of a last safety feature, and that's part of the problem. I just want to share with you. We have a local church that put together 14,000 packaged meals for us on one Sunday for our mission in 2 services. They came in with their hairnets, they had music, they had fun, and they literally packaged all of these meals that are healthy, full of fiber and protein, low fat, low cholesterol, great stuff. And just talking about compassion in our community, I bet there are a whole bunch of churches that would step up and begin to help with things like that. The problem is it needed? You see, if you right now, you're talking about $1.4 billion every year spent in the state of Missouri on food stamps. In our county, Father Jay, that comes to $2.5 million every month we're spending in food stamps. If we pulled some of that back, I bet we'd see more churches that would rise up to meet the need. And what happens then is we have a chance to really love people, listen to what's going on, develop relationship with them, really give them a hand up and help them. And that's something that the government just doesn't do.
Well, I don't think they can do it as well as we do.
No, they're not. They're not
designed to
exactly.
do that. That is part of the issue, and I agree with that part wholeheartedly. Again, part of the concern is, and I think this is where we would, I guess, corporately take a little bit of a stance on this that says we wouldn't want to lose. We'd really want to try to figure out, make sure we study it carefully to figure out how many people might fall through the cracks if we pulled all that assistance from some of the folks that right now are currently receiving it. And again, I'm not trying to say that everybody's not. Again, I know there are some people out there trying to take, advantage of some things, but there's also a lot of people out there who, and again, a lot of the kids. So they got a parent who, really isn't, their job skills aren't great and can't seem to hold a job. How do we still make sure that the kids don't fall through the net, and that even if mom and dad don't have very good job skills and can't hold a job, they don't deserve to be hungry either? How do we do all that stuff? Yeah. So we're going to come back in just a minute. We're getting ready for our break here, but we're going to come back, and I'd like to start there in the second half and just say, okay, well, what might we start suggesting, or what might we start looking at? This is Faith in Our Hometown. We are going to be right back after a real short break, okay?
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Thanks for sticking with us this Sunday morning for Faith in Our Hometown. This morning we're a little heady, but it's okay. It's a good thing. Our guest this morning is James Whitford, who's the Executive Director of Watered Gardens Gospel Rescue Mission. And we've been kind of starting to wade into this territory about, okay, so we can agree on the fact that probably the government shouldn't be the primary one that does charity. I think we can agree on that. Great. Because I think because the government's not designed to do some of the things that we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. All right. But what do we do? What do we do when we got folks who are needing, or at least in their in their own experience, they seem to think that they need the nutrition assistance and the food stamps, to buy a little, provide a little, groceries.
Well,
what do we do?
This is what I think this would be great if we could somehow pull this off. You've got about 46% in our congressional district here in Missouri who receive food stamps but are above poverty level. So that's quite a bit, that somewhere falling between 100 and maybe 130% of poverty level, where they still qualify for some food stamps, but maybe not a lot. So, that means that there's potential, I think, for the church to really help that group of people potentially. Maybe that's a good place to start. If our community is robust enough in its charity work, and we have, churches and missions that are well supported and able to provide balanced and nutritional help with food. Maybe what we could do is see a portion of those folks deferred from a welfare office, rather than that be the first stop. It would be local community first. It would be churches and charities and missions first, before you access state or federal level help. That's, again, back to that principle of subsidiarity.
Sure.
How do we take the principle of subsidiarity that, and then even Pope Benedict brought it back up again in Caritas in Veritate, or charity and truth. Right. And he talks about the importance of that, because subsidiarity really calls on the individual to consider being reciprocal in nature. It's not just being the recipient of a handout. It's more than a means-tested welfare program where, look, I don't have the means, so you give me food stamps. That's what the church is so good at, is involving relationally with people and saying, hey, listen, rather than just see you as someone who's going to receive a food basket or a meal today, I see gifting in you and skill in you and potential in you, and how can we have you be a part or a partner in what's going on in this transaction? That's something that the church is good at doing.
Yeah, and I think that in many cases we do see a lot of people who can rise to that challenge. I think the other reality that's out there too is that we're going to have some people who aren't going to be able to rise to that challenge. And again, that's when we just step in and say, you may not be able to. Because not all the folks that that I see that come to us for a little assistance, I wouldn't be able to have a job for some of them. Right. Now, I'm still they've still got their human dignity. They still got their, they're still, people worthy of love. They're all those things. But they're not going to necessarily be able to do, much in terms of being able to hold down a job or interview well or convince somebody else to, necessarily hire them. So, and I'm not talking, I think anybody that's in that category that you're talking about, I know that when most of those people can get to the point where they can feel so much better about themselves because they're able to provide for their families. They're able to hold on a job. They're able to do those things. They're able to be coached through some of those things. Those are the wonderful success stories. But again, now what do we do again on that other level for some of the other folks that just need some of the other stuff?
And just working at a mission, I've got 1,000,001 stories about things like this that are But
the ones that you've been able to help and the ones that
well, let me give you an example of a guy who would be in your category of someone you're probably not going to help to self-sufficiency. Probably about a third grade education, and heard me at one point on a TV PSA say that the working poor are happier than the welfare poor, which was a research thing that I was just citing. The working poor are happier than the welfare poor if you can do something, because God's created us to be producers, to be creators. And so he comes into the mission, and I said, hey, what are you doing here? He said, well, I heard that, and I got to tell you, I got a job after I listened to that. And I said, you did? I said, what are you doing? He's holding a sign for a furniture company on the side of the road. I said, that's great, fantastic.
Exactly.
And then I said, so what brought you to the mission today? He said, well, I've got a food stamp card, but I just wanted to come in and work for my food here today instead of use my food stamp card. So there's a sense of dignity that's being restored in people when they're given an opportunity or challenged just a little bit, even if they may never hold down a 40-hour, salaried job. There's still some dignity that's restored that I think God wants us to be a part of in helping people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and again, we've got, we run our outreach house at St. Peter's.
Right.
Okay. And we. for those folks that we can help, we'll and refer to, gaining skills or who need some extra things, we will send them to Catholic Charities or whatever other organization in town that might be able to, again, help them to develop some of those skills, be coachability, some of those things. But at the outreach, our philosophy is just simply, all right, we know there are people who are hungry in the neighborhood, who, even if it's just today they don't have enough money for lunch, rather than, next week they'll be fine, they'll be fine. And so we just simply decided we were going to start serving meals to anybody who came in. And so we tell even our parishioners, just like, okay, we got this going. Anybody that wants to come home, just come have a meal. Come have a meal with our family.
So let me share another story with you about a homeless man. I actually have a few videos of this, but one homeless guy I'm thinking of entered our long-term program, but before he did that, he was on food stamps. And he shared with me on video how there is a daycare that charges parents for the food that is provided for the kids while they're at the daycare, but the daycare owner will buy food stamp cards 50 cents on the dollar from homeless people who are willing to sell them. So it's a cut for the daycare owner, and they're walking away with 50 cents on the dollar for the food stamp card that they got. Now my question is, where are they going to be fed? Where are those guys going to be fed? See, they're coming to my mission, or maybe they're coming to your place, or I don't know.
And I'm just saying, in those moments, though, I mean, again, that daycare person is really basically, in some ways, participating in
it's a crime.
Fraud.
It is. It's a crime.
And it needs to be.
Sure.
I mean, in that context.
But when it's easy to just go and eat wherever you want and to be fed wherever you want, and you're getting a food stamp card too, you're going to be more tempted to liquidate it. And that's what I think is happening sometimes.
And maybe that's the case. And I will say, I mean, I think that when people, break the law and commit crimes, there needs to be a penalty for it.
Justice.
And it is justice.
There's government's role.
It is the government's role. And I think in those situations, something needs to happen to do some of that.
Yeah.
Again, set up to fall through the cracks. But, here's the deal. I really believe this. As a church, when you just set yourself up in the charity business, nobody can rip you off. Because you're basically saying, out of love, I'm providing this.
I agree, but I do believe you can foolishly give.
I think so. And I gotta say,
we've got to have a mind for the poor, not just a heart for the poor. It's got to be combined,
Yeah, and I would just say that in the instances where we can help people turn a corner, make a difference in their lives, fill a gap. I think that primarily we're doing most of those kinds of things in ways that I think are, pretty defendable. Now, again, are there going to be people who are going to game this system? Sure. I have to laugh because in one sense, I have to, when somebody will say, I wish some of these people would, get a job and go work. And I laugh because I'm just like, some of these people are working. They're working us, they're working every place. And again, every time they do that. But again, I will still say that when we are in the charity business, you can't really get ripped off because basically you're just saying, I got a meal for anybody who wants a meal today out of love. Now, I will say that within that context, we should try to encourage the folks who've got the skills and the abilities and to do some of those things to really make the difference because it will make a big difference in their lives.
Well, absolutely. I mean, so if a person's able to work for their food, we need to do everything we can to take them up on the offer. Because that's where dignity comes from, and you realize self-worth. So your value is recognized when you begin to work for whatever it is that you need. And so it may be little things. I mean, sometimes it's setting a goal, at a case management office, or maybe it's helping, we weave hats sometimes, or we'll do copper jewelry, simple things that almost anybody can do, but we want to try to work toward that as much as we can and make sure we're not fostering dependency in people. So easy for people to just come and then work their way into a dependent pattern of life. And that can happen on the government, and it can happen on the church. And so we've just got to be really, really careful about that. One sad thing, I'll tell you one story again. I've got about a handful of folks. We had a little focus group, and they were all on food stamps, and we just started to talk with them, kind of like you and I are talking now. It's casual conversation. I said, what would it take for you to just give them up? And they said, oh no, we even talked about incentivizing. We said, well, what if we offered you a cash exchange for that or something? And they were still very reluctant. I said, why are you so reluctant? And they all said the same thing. They said that they were afraid that if they gave them up, they'd never be able to get back on them again. And so there really is a sense of a trap that can happen with some forms of welfare. And I think we've just got to start to get away from it. Not to mention, we're spending, right now, food stamps, which is our topic of conversation, is the #2 welfare program in the nation. We're spending, I think, somewhere close to $90 billion a year in our nation on food stamps, and I'm just sure that local charities, churches, and missions could really rise to the occasion to at least take a big bite out of that. No pun intended.
Exactly. Well, our guest this morning has been James Whitford from Water Gardens Gospel Rescue Mission, and we've been talking about how we approach some of these things philosophically, how we go about trying to feed some of our neighbors, but at the same time, kind of stop some of the cyclical problems that we can incur when we try to do so. So we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Don't go away. Thanks for joining us.
Find out how a Mercy doctor can take care of you. At Mercy, your life is our life's work. Quality, safety, and an exceptional patient experience. Mercy is grateful to be recognized as one of the top 15 health systems in the United States. At Mercy, your life is our life's work.
Well, thanks for joining us again this morning for Faith in Our Hometown. An interesting discussion this morning. During the break, we were just talking about we need 2 hours to talk about this stuff rather than trying to talk about it just in a half an hour when there's so many things. This is a huge balancing act when you try to, as people of good faith, try to do the Lord's work in feeding the poor. And then how do you do it the best way possible? I think we can agree on the fact that it really the work of charity should belong first and foremost to the churches rather than to the government. And I think we can agree on that pretty strongly, James. The other thing I think we can agree on is the fact that, that people really do need their human dignity, and part of the human dignity is that of working. And how do we help people to want to step forward and work and have their dignity for being able to feel good about making their own way in life? And I think we can agree on all those things. Then we get to that little fuzzier ground about, okay, if we give in one area or another, how do we do that? And we get trapped in there because it gets tricky for us. Join us again next week for Faith in Our Hometown. We'll see if we can not solve some other problem.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.